welcome to Leave Your Mark. I'm Scott Livingston, and today I have the wonderful privilege of speaking with Bill Knowles. Bill is currently the Director of Reconditioning and Athletic Development for HPSports. He is a consultant to many professional college sports teams throughout the world and many high-performing athletes from teams in almost every league around the globe. Bill is a pioneer in the world of reconditioning, a practice near and dear to my own heart. It is a unique blend of the powers of therapeutic practice and the methods of performance preparation that results in more robust and higher performing athletes. I've asked Bill on to Leave Your Mark because he most certainly has walked a path of change agent and innovator, and his mark on the lives of elite and amateur sports athletes is more than evident. I am honored to have him on the show today. Welcome, Bill.
Thanks, Scott. It's great to be here.
Yeah. First question for you is, you work with a lot of international athletes and walk into a lot of sports dressing rooms. What's the nicest dressing room you've ever walked into in your career? You went, wow, that's incredible.
There's a lot of them, and they're all trying to keep up with each other. Yeah. I would say from a collegiate perspective, one of the ones I walked in and I said, this is pretty special, was University of North Carolina men's basketball. I mean, just the hallway, the storied professionals and talent that came through there. So it was pretty amazing. In the professional ranks, I was a little bit awe-inspired at Manchester United. And what they had, their facilities, and it was very, very good. And everyone's been keeping up. So it's like, guys, they've all redone it. Manchester City was very good, but they built their new facility, and I haven't been there. And there's been some pro teams that I visited as well that I thought were pretty fantastic. But yeah, probably Man U was pretty special, into that changing room. The one that made you tingle, it's not because it was so fancy; it's just what it stood for. Was England rugby at Twickenham, their national stadium, and it's that warrior mentality that's in there. It's a European changing room. It's different than American changing rooms, with the big oak lockers and comfy swivel chairs like we have in the U.S. pros. There, now they just sit on a bench, and it looks like a high school almost. It's nice, but it's no frills. Mm-hmm. But it had a grit and a culture to it. It was posh, but it just stood for something, and it made your hair stand on your ends. So, and they were playing New Zealand, so you can only imagine.
Well, I'm going to cycle back to those feelings a little bit later in the show. I want to start sort of talking about your life growing up in New York. You were youngest of 6. Did you have to fend for yourself as a youngster in a family of that many kids, or what was life like growing up?
Yeah, there was a 10-year difference between youngest and oldest, my older brother, and so the young memories were just roughing it up with everyone, and I remember having to do the goal line dive in the living room over the pillows and the couch cushions, and my brothers would be the defensive line, and I had to go over the top of them, and so it was pretty easy to stop me. They'd just throw me. But my next brother was closest to me, was 3 years older, and so the two of us really hung out quite a bit. But there was no doubt we were on a teacher's salary, and there was at any time 8 people or 6 people sitting at that dinner table, and when it came time to grab that last, tiny little pork chop, my dad would say, who was a teacher, say, "Great, I'm going to bring this to lunch tomorrow," and there'd be 6 of us staring at each other like, that's it for the meat. So it was back to butter and bread and butter and peanut butter and shove it in, get some calories.
It's an interesting thematic amongst many of the guys that I've interviewed in the conditioning and performance realm, that their fathers or mothers were teachers. Did growing up under the supervision of a teacher change the way you looked at school or how you took yourself to school?
For sure. Yeah, for sure. And just being able to go, with him to see the, where he taught and hang out and sit at his desk and play with their pencils and erasers and things. But it was good. It was an educational, discussions at the table quite often. And So it had a big influence. And then there was teaching in the family. So he was a teacher. My sister went into physical education to teach, and yeah, now I'm surrounded by it. My wife is a teacher. Her mom was a teacher. So yeah, it's continued.
So you originally went into phys ed. Um, Tell me about your decision. Was that because born of sort of that influence, or was it because you really liked sport or exercise? What drove you into that world?
Phys ed was my best class in elementary school and high school. No joke. Learning did not come easy. I graduated high school with a 78 average, I think, and I worked for that. So I didn't have a problem with work ethic and effort. I was just dumb. And yeah, it just didn't click. Phys ed, I had the perfect score, perfect grades. I never missed a class, straight A student. And yeah, I really liked that. And I just connected with some of the PE teachers, and I thought that was something I wanted to do. Once I got to college, things clicked. All the courses, I turned into a B plus and then an A student. And then all of a sudden, all my sports medicine classes and core classes, I was an A plus student. So things clicked. So I got my reps in young. I struggled. I wasn't that smart, but it paid off because once something clicked, at 19 years old, and I was smart again. So it worked out.
Can you touch on that as what you felt clicked? Was it your sort of feeling that you were in the right place at the right time with the kinds of information that you really sort of got to your heart? You were finding your passion early, or did you have an influence from a professor or teacher or colleague that you were growing up with that kind of made you sort of think you were in the right place?
No, the core class, your PE classes, your anatomy and physiology, and those things, that was easy because I was just interested in it. It was fantastic. But even the things, my father was a history teacher, so I'd take history classes, and I really enjoyed those. But just your intro to psychology and macroeconomics, and just the stuff you had to take that I should have really struggled, I didn't. And I just think when I got away from home, and I wasn't coddled, that's for darn sure. I think, though, I just saw the purpose of, like, I'm up here in the woods in upstate New York in the middle of nowhere, and it's like, this is what I'm doing, and I just focused. I think I just really just focused. So it worked out.
And you were relatively competitive in soccer and skiing. Were those sports big influencers in who you've become, or were they just something that you used to sort of pass your physical, desire to be physical and be out there and doing stuff in the fresh air?
Well, I think there was a good competitive spirit growing up as a youngster, just with all my brothers and sisters, and then a group of friends, good, healthy friends that I had in high school, and we were successful in soccer. Again, small, not a big high school or anything, but we were the best, and we did very, very well. So I tasted that success. Skiing, alpine skiing, just did a lot of it growing up, and skiing and then alpine skiing. I didn't ski race at a high school level, but I was very successful. I won all those races. Now, I've worked with a lot of internationals and top juniors in the world, so it was a low level, but I was the best at that low level. And so I liked that feeling of being competitive, and I just found success regularly in those things I touched. Went to college, played a Division III level. Again, it's the right sized for me, for my skills and abilities, but I had good success at that, and I enjoyed it. It ended up, Scott, really imparting things, because yes, now I work with many international soccer players and national soccer players, and with the Philadelphia Union Academy and their first team. But skiing, my first job was at a private ski racing academy in upstate Vermont. So I did a little coaching to make some money on the weekends in college. And then my first job was as an athletic trainer at this Burke Mountain Academy. So yes, my skiing background helped there, but I went literally to the best junior-aged athletes in the nation, and many of them in the world, overnight. I'd always envisioned on going to that academy. That was a dream. Never talented enough, and never could have afforded it. But I read a book about that. Like, remember I said how I wasn't that smart in school? Yeah. So every other Wednesday, when it was free reading day in the English class, I just read this book called How the Racers Ski by the founder of that sports academy. I probably read it 100 times. Wow. Yeah, I didn't go into any other books. I just read that one. The next thing I knew, Scott, I'm working at that school. And I spent 14 years there in my first job, fully embedded, full go. And that's different than what a lot of young people are doing these days. They don't lock into one place and really see it out. So
tell me how did that job opportunity come about? You had obviously shifted gears in phys ed and gone into ATC and sort of had a therapeutic background, and then you get in this first job, and you're obviously, from what you just said, it was a form of dream. So how do you make a dream come true, so to speak?
So when I was doing this part-time teaching, coaching on the weekends, I was full into my sports medicine degree to become a certified athletic trainer. But again, a very strong phys ed background and bringing up for 2.5 years of my college experience. The guy that hired me to the head coach at this ski resort locally, he was a PE teacher, and he really was a master teacher. He was very good and a very good ski coach. So he saw a lot of unique things in my ability to work with people and to teach, but also to coach and things. He took me to a coach's education course, paid for it all. We went to New Hampshire, and he paid for everything for me. And I met the athletic director of this sports academy, ski racing academy. They had never had an athletic trainer, and he said, "We're hiring one. You're young. This fits in perfect. It's an entry-level position for payment." And so I had the skiing background, and off I went. And I also had to mount all the bindings on the skis. I was like a ski technician as well, so you had to wear these hats. In the interview, they said there's a building called the ATC, the Alpine Training Center. And now I was a certified athletic trainer, acronyms ATC. So I was feeling a bit confident when they said, "So have you ever mounted bindings on a ski and to do all that tuning and to repair ski boots and all this?" And I just, "Yes, I have, of course." Yeah. So while I did ski race growing up, we took this shit to a ski shop and they took care of things. I knew how to tune skis, my own skis, but putting them on and all these other different nuances. So I became a self-learner. So literally on weeknights and weekends in the autumn before the snow flew, I would go up and practice, learn how to do it, until I finally got caught by a good coach who said, "You've never done this before." And I'm, "Nope." And he goes, "Okay." And he just kept it quiet and he taught me how to do it. So
you didn't have the advantage of YouTube in those days.
I did not have the advantage. Yeah, I just put a lot of holes in a lot of skis. They were old ones, and I practiced. But and that really turned things. So you got embedded into this. It'd be almost like if you were working in hockey, that you were the kit man, you were the athletic trainer, and you were a strength coach. Yeah. You found all those different nuances about what the sport is, what the culture is, what the team is, and how all these pieces fit together. And you hang out, and you're coaching, of course, as an assistant on the hill. So I wore all these hats over 14 years. Traditionally as a trainer, and then we had a lot of injuries, Scott. So I really had to go into that realm of reduce injuries, and that's when I became, a CS, certified strength conditioning specialist.
So what drove you into that? Was it
injuries,
and you started saying to yourself, "I need to know more about this stuff so I can manage this better"? Is that it?
Yeah, injury rates. And so I knew coming out of college that sports medicine, do no harm. And injury prevention is a very big part of being an athletic trainer, yet they don't teach you anything about really injury prevention other than, heat illness, some common things, health oriented versus physically prepared oriented. So my first season there, it was typical school, started in August. But when the ski season started in January, that's not true, November. But we got to January, Scott, and in 7 weeks, we had 9 ACL injuries, a femur fracture, a tib-fib fracture, and a medial meniscal tear. I had 12 season-ending surgical injuries in a 7-week period. Wow. And that was ski racing. And I said, "Oh my God!" At that level, there were some equipment issues, new equipment that were contributing to this. The second year, I had 6 ACLs. So I became very good at rehabbing this. Again, they never taught you this, so you had to really figure it out. I became very good at it because I had a good population. I had a lot of kids to take care of. And after about 3 or 4 years of this, I realized I've got to put a stop this in the sense of, can I put a stop to it? Can we reduce the injury rates? So my first 6 years there, we ended up having, because the rates started to drop, my first 6 years we had 3.5 injuries a year for 6 years, right? So we really dropped it down by just basic things. After those 6 years, I completely took over all of the program design of their performance training, strength training, conditioning, when they lifted, just call it like a performance director at this point. The second 6 years, we reduced the ACL rate to 0.5 ACLs per year for those next 6 years. And we had 2 years with none, we had a year with two, and then a year with one, right? But that average was 0.05. So I know that what I now look at is a common sense approach can really do it, but it's not common sense everywhere. Mm-hmm. So it was progressive, it was thought through, but it was applied, and it was consistency applied, and there was a full buy-in by everyone at that school. And yeah, we did it. So that was my first 14 years of my work experience.
Nice to have a sort of a petri dish for your principles and beliefs, and then be able to deliver them and see whether they actually do work out. So that's powerful.
Yeah.
You've been married for 24 years. Is that when you met your wife in that period of time?
Yeah, it's a good question. It is. Yeah, we were up there. It's called the Northeast Kingdom of Vermont, and so it's a dark, lonely place. Oh my God. So after 2 or 3 years up there, fortunately, she came up as a French teacher, and it didn't take long. So we were married like 2 years later, and yeah, we've had a very happy life together.
And you had 2 daughters. How did you balance, if there ever really is a term balance, but how did you manage what your passion, and obviously a massive workload around all these rehabs and fixing skis and everything else, and being a dad and a husband and stuff? Were there challenging moments in that?
There are. You're just a very strong wife who had her own aspirations, and she loved skiing. She was a Division I lacrosse player at the University of Vermont. She enjoyed her skiing. She saw what my passion was and supported it. Life was pretty simple, and then we had the children, and we made that choice to say she's going to work less. That was her choice as well, and really spent that time as a teacher with our children. But while she was pregnant, she was going to get her master's degree at Dartmouth College as well, and so she's still driven. So she stayed at home, and then was doing homeschooling and home teaching for the local community, pretty common in the countryside. Mm-hmm. And yeah, so she's just been tremendously strong. And I would travel. I'd go away for chunks of time and miss a lot of things, and she kept it all together and still supports me today. And so,
you're in the middle of BF nowhere.
Yeah.
So how does what you're doing start to transcend outwards? How do you start to link into the opportunities to connect with other athletes from other kinds of performance milieu and start working with athletes beyond the scope of this academy?
Yeah. So it was the top academy in the world. It was the first sports academy in the United States before even Ballatieri tennis and things. 1970 it was started. And the two gentlemen who started it, the founder, Warren Witherhouse, passed away. The next guy that started it with him was a recent graduate right out of Middlebury College in Vermont, Finn Gunderson. And he was, probably 23 years old or so, 24. I still work with Finn today. So he ended up being my boss, the headmaster at that academy. He was incredibly inspirational to me. And then we work together at this company called HPSports. He's involved in coaches education. He's close to that retirement age, but he still is a wise old owl. What happened is we had a lot of junior national team athletes, and then U.S. national team athletes. We had Olympic champions. We had world champions there, junior world champions, and we would travel. So the ski world, like a lot of the hockey world or the tennis world, it's very small. And the word was out that I was doing a lot of very successful rehab programs, and then the strength training program. Everyone was looking at it. So in that small world, it was catching on. I left and ended up working, after 14 years, I worked with an orthopedic surgeon. He was kind of our team doctor. And what he said was, I'll give you a small space to set up a good training center. You help me in the office a couple days a week, which was a nice trade-off. I learned a lot by being in that office. That's good. Working with other people, other injuries and things. And what happened was I got invited to this special program by a colleague of mine, Vern Gambetta. And it was outside of Champaign, Illinois. And there's a famous sprint coach, Gary Winkler, speed and hurdle coach and things at the University of Illinois. And he would bring in like-minded individuals to this. It was like a retreat, almost like a Cub Scout, Boy Scout retreat in the woods. They'd invite people from around the world. They were track coaches typically, some sports scientists, well accomplished. About 15 or 20 people would get invited in. And you'd just sit for 3 days. You'd cook all your meals together. You'd sleep in bunk rooms, and there was no frills. You know, you bring your own sleeping bag or sheets, and you just talk shop. You gave presentations. You can talk. You can't cover up shit. You know, you share. You're honest. You can challenge. And I got invited to that. And the new performance director from England Rugby was in that room, and he saw what I was doing with alpine ski racers, and he saw this. This was 2005. 2003. And what he said was, we've got a couple of our England rugby players that we want to be eligible for the 2003 Rugby World Cup, but they have knee injuries and they might not make it. But if we accelerate their rehab, they have a chance to be selected. So they sent them to Vermont. These guys stayed for 1 month in Vermont, and it was successful. And that kind of kicked things off. And more rugby players, and then the Premiership soccer guys all started hearing about it. And they were all traveling to Vermont at that point. For about another 10 years, I stayed in Vermont, and guys from around the world, even Australia, would fly into the middle of nowhere. It was pretty fun.
What are what you would call common sense deficits in the normal model of performance medicine or therapy that, I know I have my answers to it, but I'm kind of interested in yours, that you think are missing in the way, our people are educated or brought up, and that has clicked in your life and you sort of figured out?
I think that it's evolving. And the thing, as I'm at 30 years now in my career, I don't even remotely consider seeing it like, well, I'm in the tail end of my career or anything. It's just still too exciting, and I keep making connections from things that I was thinking about 20 years ago, 25 years ago, to just literally a few days ago. I had to pull up a bunch of old research papers to validate things that I remembered and I thought, in order to have discussions on current topics today. So what I think we're missing is this understanding of the whole. And injury is so much about the injured body part, but there's not a good sound appreciation of the whole. And a lot of people will say, like, no, train the whole body, do movements, functional movements, and it is about the whole person. But they're not really doing anything about it. They're just saying something about it. So they're not really walking that line. Mm-hmm. And we're still caught up with a protection-based mindset on all injuries and how we handle it. So we diagnose locally, we protect locally, we look at biological healing locally. And what I've witnessed now, and I see it more clearly than ever, is that process is neglecting the whole. It's neglecting the global sense of the whole person and the movement strategies required to actually enhance the local healing lesions. And it's being neglected. It's being addressed later, weeks later, months later. And what I feel is there's significant damage has been done. So I'm really learning is that the very early stages of after an injury, after a surgery, I'm starting to wonder that these are the most critical times to have an influence in the middle and long-term outcomes. And that's unique. Most people aren't thinking that.
Mm-hmm. What has been your greatest challenge in some sense, either convincing or um, imparting the wisdom of what you've learned to either athletes or organizations?
It's trying to break the written rules, or these long-standing assumptions that this is the only way things happen, or this is how you handle something. So medicine is really slow to change. Even though medical strategies may continue to evolve, again, if you look at the ACL reconstruction, it hasn't evolved that much. There are better techniques and things, but they still re-tear, and they still have problems. And they also can be very successful as well. But there's things that just don't go away, Scott. They stick, and they stick for a very, very long time. Like 220 minus your age for maximum heart rate, right? Your listeners should know the history behind that, and if they don't, they need to look into that. It's a fairly random number, yet it's golden number. It doesn't go away. And a very bright researching physician, Dr. David Joyner, at Mayo Clinic. I was hanging out with him 2 summers ago, and what he had said was, these things are on a 40-year cycle. So it often takes 40 years to remove a common understanding and a common statement or medical discussion that had happened. You can't get rid of stuff. So that's where we are with things. You can't walk on a repaired meniscus. You can't bend the knee a certain way because you have to allow healing. With ACLs, which I've done a lot of work with, Scott, as you know, it's like at 11 weeks, you can't run on it, you can't cut on it, you can't laterally lunge on it, you can't do these things. At 12 weeks, it's go time. And so I've always questioned, like, it's based on a time, it's based on a calendar, it's not based on what's in front of you. So what I've found is, in dealing with both professional teams and other orthopedic groups and so forth, is trying to ask why behind a lot of their decisions, and they're not ready to have those discussions. They don't just say because, but it's way easier to go behind the litigious side of things to say, the risk is too high, you'll be the one that's responsible for this. You can't put these guys into water because the risk of infection is too high. And it's like, that one hasn't gone away. It's not true, but it won't go away. And I don't think that one will go away for a very, very long time. So that's one of the big challenges.
I read an interesting book recently called "The End of Average," and it's a book really about a cultural sort of driver in math that created averagarianism, which was essentially what was the driver of our educational system in the 19th century, and it really sort of created an educational system where we all came out with sort of a certain level of ability, and it taught to the mass versus to the individual. And I won't go into all the details of the book. It's a great book, but basically the author talks about how we really have to recognize individualism and the individual. And in essence, what you just spoke about is this concept of understanding the individual circumstances, and the individual healing strategies and stuff that person's going through. And we're always sort of hammering against this more average-based belief system that's sort of easy to dispense, but not necessarily creating the right kind of results that we want.
I have a very good stage, a very good platform to ask or to present this discussion, to say, are we pushing hard enough? Are we willing to listen? And remember, pushing hard doesn't mean trying to unnecessarily take risks that aren't calculated, or risks that are determined and negative. It means, are we pushing the boundaries of what we're doing, how we're doing, and why we're doing? So I speak at this big international soccer conference for the past 7 years, and it's mostly orthopedic surgeons, sports medicine doctors, physiotherapists from around the world. And they've given me this platform because they like the message, the organizers of the conference. And I get to speak on the same stage with top orthopedic surgeons in the world, sports orthopedic surgeons in the world. And I feel as if I am pushing against them a little bit. And It's not even a little bit. I am. And so 2 years ago, and then this past year, I evolved this slide to try to put things into really simple images and pictures, and because it helps, and it doesn't try to overtalk a surgeon. And if it's a simple image and simple pictures, they understand you're not trying to belittle. You're just trying to cut to the chase with a photo. And so what we have is this idea where you have a Ferrari, and the Ferrari represents a professional athlete. And then the Ferrari has a crash, an injury. And then they reconstruct this Ferrari, they rebuild this Ferrari. And then on the other side, when that Ferrari goes back to the racetrack, or that automobile goes back to the racetrack, it's now a red Porsche Carrera. It wasn't a Ferrari Formula One Ferrari. It's red, it has 4 wheels, it's fast. I mean, we'd all like to have it, but it's not the same. And then I had that discussion 2 years ago, just briefly, and then this past year, I just said, I'm just going to put it up there. And I said, in a big, bold statement, is close enough good enough? Question mark. And then the next statement below it is, do you even know the difference? And that took courage, because the reality is there are many sports orthopedic surgeons and sports medicine doctors, and for that matter, even performance coaches and physical therapists and athletic trainers. They don't know the difference. And you have to. You have to know that you haven't achieved a full restoration, or even a better restoration following injury or surgery. And if you don't know, if you haven't seen it before, then it's difficult for you to be an expert or to really lead that. And people just sit on their belief saying, no, this is good, we've got this. But they don't know what they don't know sometimes. I'm not putting them down. I'm just saying they haven't seen it.
What's been your experience? You don't have to throw anybody under the bus. It's not my intention in the question, but your experience walking into a lot of, high performance organizations, there's a perception by the general public that they must have the best of the best in the room taking care of the Ferraris, and that's often not necessarily the case. You've seen different performance milieu, and you've seen the good, the bad, and the ugly. What do you think is the driver of some organizations not creating the Ferrari garage, and instead, just having an average garage for all these Ferraris?
There are a lot of average garages. There's a lot of them, and it's mostly led, from what I've seen. Put it this way: there's average garages from the medical side, and in my opinion, I'm seeing quite a bit more well above average and performance-based garages, so to speak, on the performance side. And I see an evolution of the performance staff taking place at a far greater rate than is the medical side. And that goes all the way down to recovery strategies, which is part of prevention. That comes down to manual therapy, even, that a lot of strength coaches, performance coaches are developing the hand skills and manual therapy skills. And they're oftentimes shunned for doing that. They're not allowed to put their hands on the athletes. It's a different domain, apparently, which is ridiculous. So I see them evolving, and so therefore the medical side isn't evolving as fast. They might come up with better MRIs. They're coming up with better ultrasound. They have faster needles to inject cortisone. So they might have these things, but they're not necessarily making a change in the path of that athlete significantly. Where that comes from is, it's unfair. Many athletic trainers, and most, are still under the umbrella of the team orthopedic, or the team doctor, which is usually an orthopedic surgeon in North America, and other sports medicine doctors. So they only develop or advance their craft to the degree that they're supported to do so by the team physicians. And many team physicians are very conservative. They're covering their ass, which I understand and things, but they are very conservative. So it's such a common language with most medical groups in pro sports. You just know what the language is before you even go there. When you actually meet a very progressive orthopedic surgeon or progressive sports medicine doctor, a non-operating doctor, it is refreshing, and I latch onto these guys because we can have some good discussions. But otherwise, they are withholding the opportunities to develop for athletic trainers and physical therapists to the degree that they would want to do things. They're just not allowed.
Mm-hmm.
And so then they become complacent. And it's true at the college level too. They just become complacent. No one's pushing them to evolve to higher levels.
Mm-hmm. What do you've been in, European dressing rooms with European organizations, other international organizations, North American. What do you see as the differences between some of the, I would say cultural dynamics and around sports medicine performance that you would see in European or even British soccer versus, France, Italy, etc., and then what's going on in Australia and rugby. You're seeing a lot of different dimensions of how people come at that, and sometimes there's an ignorance of what the other side is doing, so to speak. I'm kind of curious, as now you've seen things, what are people doing well and not so well, and what are some of the differences?
It really just comes down to this. There are so many commonalities and similarities in how people are doing the same medicalized approach towards preparing athletes following injury or surgery for a return to team training and competition. There are so many common languages and common discussions that are taking place. That medical community is there, Scott. Then there's also what I see from a performance training perspective and standpoint. There are so many also common basic strategies to handle these $5, $10, $15 million athletes and things like that. So that said, there are places that have it really figured out, and it's really good looking, and it's fantastic. That's true here in the United States. Mm-hmm. So what I'm seeing is that pockets have it figured out, are doing an incredible job here, but they're smaller. There's less of them than is the more standardized approach, because everybody just watch what everyone else is doing, and they don't want to take those unnecessary risks. Mm-hmm. Risk is critical. You must be willing to take risks in order to advance. A risk is risk of not doing things is a greater threat to me than a risk of doing things. Mm-hmm. Like the risk of not getting someone in the water is a greater threat than the risk of saying he could get an infection. Mm-hmm. And so, or the risk of putting a guy in a brace for 6 weeks is far greater than walking them with good education and getting their muscles switched on, teaching them how to use crutches, and trusting that they're not going to go party that night in the disco and mess up their knee or their ankle or whatever it is. Mm-hmm. So anyway, there are good places all over the world. There are average places all over the world. It's no one culture has it anywhere more figured out, in my opinion, than anyone else.
Are there any things that you got the pulse on when you visited the ones that do have their SHIT going in the right direction that are common threads to that success in your viewpoint?
Yeah, it's usually a progressive-minded orthopedic group or sports medicine. Europe, 9 times out of 10, no, it's almost 10 times out of 10, the team physicians are not surgeons. They are primary care sports medicine doctors. They typically have an exercise science or biomechanics background that was a part of that. They understand all aspects of medicine. In this country, they're almost all orthopedic surgeons are the head team physicians. They have taken sports medicine fellowships to learn about the whole treatment of an athlete, but there's no question they are focused on surgery. That's what they do. That's their livelihood, and that's where they spend the majority of their time thinking about. Mm-hmm. American sports do not have full-time in-house team doctors. There's only a few teams that have this now. Europe, the big clubs that is, all throughout Europe, they all have a full-time in-house primary care sports medicine physician with ultrasound units right in-house. They can do inject, they can do PRP, they can do all these things, right? They take care of all those athletes on a day-to-day basis. They wear training clothing. They don't wear a suit, and they have sneakers on, and they don't have suit shoes on game day. They're like an athletic trainer, but they're doctors. Hmm. That's the difference. And so what that does is that allows the head physiotherapists sport coaches or the sports training coaches, they're integrated in a much tighter model, and they're just way more progressive. So many not as progressive as I think they should be, but they certainly have it going on at a faster rate than most places I've seen here in the United States. Again, in the United States, there are pockets that have a really good, well-oiled machine of athletic trainers, physical therapists, or physiotherapists, as they're bringing more English guys, Australian guys in, who just approach injury differently, and then they get the right doctor as well, and they're making a big difference. But the doctor has a lot to do. The team doctor has a lot to do in the direction and how progressive this is going to be.
Change tracks a little bit here. What do you feel are some of the things for you that have created sustainability in your career that has allowed you to have a longevity in it?
So I was incredibly fortunate in my first 14 years at that Burke Academy that the team doctor we had, we're in the country, so he was an hour and a half away, drive on a highway, no traffic, so he's far away. He was our key guy, so when you got to bring athletes down to him and things. He was incredibly progressively minded. He agreed in a fast, progressive approach towards rehab or reconditioning. He supported that 100% for me. So I had a lot of his athletes, anyone who got hurt, basically, he did the surgery because he was a good technician, and he supported it, go, go, go. Then my next 10 years after I left there, taking me to 24 years of my career, 25 years of my career, I went to this another group, orthopedic group in Vermont, where I had my own training center. But for 10 years, these guys, I went to them because they were progressive. And they opened the gates as well and supported me 100%. With a sports medicine doctor and orthopedic surgeons that I leaned on for research, not to do the research, but give me what the data says out there. Why can't we do this? I want to do this. This is what I'm seeing. Support it. So that's all I've ever known. It's incredibly unique, Scott. Mm-hmm. In all my travels, 90% of everyone says, we've always had either a conservative doctor who just said, no, you can't do this. We wanted to be more progressive, but they didn't allow us. Or I had a really good doctor at one team, but then I moved to another team. They've shut it down. So we can't do the things we used to do at the other team. And they're very frustrated. And so the biggest question is always, how do you get them to allow you to put a guy in water after surgery, to weight bear sooner, to begin doing certain exercises ahead of whatever the written protocol is? That's the biggest frustration with young professional sports medicine people and strength coaches, as well as veteran and seasoned ones. And it comes down to, you have to build a relationship, and you have to be strong in your presentation of what the research and the data is, and you have to be willing to offer your experiences, which is level 1 evidence, good experiences, with this doctor to show you why you feel you should be doing it. You've done it before, or you went and visited a colleague and colleagues were doing this, and we'd like to have a discussion about it. But if that surgeon or if that team doctor isn't coming to the table to have that discussion, then I say good luck. I just don't know what other advice to add, Scott. I just say good luck or leave, but you have to try a different strategy to bring them to the table to get a chance to discuss why you want to do what you want to do. And
What's been your sort of biggest Achilles heel for you of your character, the way you bring yourself to your work? What's a tough part of being you?
It's typically going to be that I don't have a lot of patience for average. And that doesn't mean that I don't have patience for someone who's average but learning and willing to learn and on the up. It is that average or that complacent individual. I don't enjoy being around that environment. And so that can be, for me, it can be strength coaches as well. And it can be athletic trainers and therapists and even doctors. So when I can ask questions to doctors, because I do, so I can make them uncomfortable. I can then get uncomfortable myself, which it's good. But I never, put them down. I just ask why we can't do things. And these are my experiences. So what's hard for me is that I've had 30 years of many different experiences versus 30 years of the same experience, or, only a few. And I've been fortunate to have had a lot of success with a lot of elite level athletes, professional world-class Olympic, with kids, high school kids, academy level athletes. And when someone says we can't do this, I already know it's like, but we can do this because I have done this and we've done it this way and we've gotten good results. And where I have the problem, my Achilles heel, is when it is, yes, but you are taking risks and you shouldn't have been doing that. That's when I'm like, this is going to be a tough conversation. It's not a yelling match. It's just, how can I get this person to be willing to have the discussion? Mm-hmm. So yeah, mediocrity in average environments for me is tough. It's hard for me to stick around those places.
What's been a personal cost for you of being good at what you do?
I guess that's a good question, Scott. Candor is essential in a professional or high-performing environment. It's difficult to give, and it's very difficult to receive, but it is essential. So I'm definitely a guy that has been said, Bill it's very strong, he's very direct. He's got very good candor in how he approaches this. And so I can be looked upon then as, you're arrogant, you've got to ease up on people, not ease up on people, but you just, you come in strong. And so that personally, I'm like, that's not me. I am a nice person. I get along with everyone really well. But when we're having discussions about right, wrong, when we're having discussions about experiences, and that I can back those up with a strong, detailed explanation, a justification, when it's looked upon as, he's not a team player, that's always a tough one. Then it feels like it's personal, but it shouldn't be personal. Mm-hmm. But it's really easy for all of us to personalize that. Mm-hmm. And at the end of the day, I can often just review and say, no, I'm not wrong. They just don't like how I was saying it. So it doesn't happen that often. Yeah. But to answer your question is, that's a tough one when I'm misunderstood or something. Yeah.
It's a good segue into a part of doing my podcast, which is I discovered a book a few years ago called The Day You Were Born, and it mixes numerology with astrology, and I think it's kind of interesting. I found my purpose in it. So you're a Gemini 6. Mm-hmm. Your purpose is to be able to maintain your truth and still play many roles, enjoying life and experiencing freedom because your moral boundaries are well defined. The man who listens to reason is the last. Reason enslaves all whose minds are not strong enough to master her. George Bernard Shaw. This combination has the power to master the mind with ease. Venus gives them a strong spiritual cord, a toughness or ability to concentrate, an innate wisdom that helps them get to the meaning of things. Those with a Mercury-Venus energy may feel a strong calling to serve people and will have the ability to inspire them.
It's profound. I like that.
Yeah.
I mean, there's some. Yeah, my George Bernard Shaw, I believe it was what was the quote? Some people ask why, and others ask, why not, or whatever.
That's my favorite saying. That's where I got into the book.
Yeah, and I heard that was actually presented to me. Vern Gambetta presented it to me. I think the very first time I had ever met him, many years ago, at one of his courses, and that was it. I was like, I asked why not. Scott, I had successfully had athletes on skis skiing 5 weeks after ACL reconstruction. And when people ask why, I would say, why not? It's they've already shown on these ski machines lateral movement qualities. We did it because they could. Remember, these are flat terrain. These are heroes, snow, perfect conditions. They go out for 4 runs, and then we go in and we spend another hour and a half doing our reconditioning.
Mm-hmm.
But if you think you worked in ice hockey, it's like, it's a sliding sport. Those skis on the bottom of their feet is what they do. Skates on the bottom of a hockey guy, he's safer on skates than he is walking in a wet bathroom with a shower, at the arena.
Mm-hmm.
Skates is where they're safe. So I've always looked at reason as to why can't we do things, and then logically went down that path. So yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's actually my favorite saying. And how I found the book was I found the book and looked through the chapter that was on me, Sag 3, and I had that saying actually taped to the top of my desktop. And I went to read my purpose, and the saying after it was that saying. So I knew I'd found something that was connected to me. If you look back at yourself 20, 25 years ago, if you ran into that guy, what would you say to yourself?
Rephrase that for me.
Well, if you ran into Bill Knowles 25 years ago when you were, just starting out, what would you say to him?
It'd probably be the same as a lot of the young people are asking me these questions today, and that is, how did you arrive at the place you are in respect to having the ability to have a discussion as to why we can do certain things or why we can't. And I'm always talking about it is, dude, I'm 30 years into this. You're 5. You have to be patient and have good experiences. But I had this meeting many years ago. I did meet me, with a couple different people, and they had a profound effect. And I just stayed in touch with them. And I watched what they did. I heard what their mistakes were, and I learned from them. They were, again, this gentleman Gary Winkler, a running coach and sprint coach for Gambetta, was very influential. Steve Merlin, who worked in hockey, professional hockey for a little while there, really good. And Jimmy Radcliffe, University of Oregon, was another. These guys, when I listened to them, they were just bringing things down to a very simple discussion. And looking at the basics, and looking at it from how do you deliver, how do you teach. And they weren't rehab specialists necessarily; they're all coaching and performance specialists. But it fit to the rehab model perfectly. So yeah, if I met me 30 years ago, type thing, I would probably have said, I need to pay attention to what he's doing. What does he read? Who does he follow? Who does he listen to? So, yeah.
Well, you're going to pass from this earth one day, hopefully not for a long time, but if you do, and when you do, how would you like to be remembered?
Probably as a teacher. Yeah.
Cool.
Someone that had, high energy, inspired, shared, and was ultimately a teacher. Yeah. Yeah.
That's it, my friend. Thank you for taking the time. It's been an outstanding hour, so appreciate you giving me an hour of your time.
It's fantastic. That was good talk. I like how you framed the question, Scott. You pushed me back again against the chair. And I'm like, if people, this is me. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Exactly. Thank you. Thanks for taking the time. It's good to spend some time with you, Bill, and hopefully it's not the last time. So
cheers. Thanks, Scott.
Have a good one. Bye-bye.